Physics used to be called natural philosophy in more scientifically productive centuries. So-called modern science is largely bootstrapped technology, built on scientific principles that were around before Einstein. Einstein himself warned that pure mathematics cannot claim to be natural or philosophical, and at the end of his life expressed grave doubts that his work would endure. Meanwhile, his devotees raised him to sainthood, ignored his caution, and became mesmerised by their computer screens and chalkboards covered with inscrutable math symbols. Einstein was a dreamer who largely originated this century-old mathematical mess by imagining perception is reality. That's like saying of someone who is moving away from you that their space is shrinking and their watch is ticking more slowly. But relativity theory allows the departing person to say the same of you. Einstein, with his theory of relativity, removed absolute standards by making length and time rubbery and a matter of arbitrary choice of moving frames of reference, which cannot be equivalent if we are to define energy and mass. Another fundamental error of Einstein's has prevented a more mundane explanation for the chirp signals from LIGO. Einstein discarded the medium for the transmission of waves in a vacuum, called the ether, which is essential for Maxwell's theory of electromagnetism and to explain the dielectric properties of the vacuum. It's impossible to wave nothing. Light must have an electrically polarizable medium, an ether. Having a universal medium discards Einstein's principle of the equivalence of inertial frames of reference and the constancy of the speed of light. Why is this important? Because the huge LIGO vacuum chambers are full of ether and the design assumes the speed of light to be a universal constant. Let's look at LIGO. Weiss devised the approach to gravitational wave detection in 1967 during lesson planning for a relativity course he was teaching at MIT, and I quote, "You'd make a right triangle of objects floating freely in a vacuum," Weiss told his students, according to a 2000 interview, "and we'd send light beams between them and then be able to figure it out. What does the gravitational wave do to the time it takes light to go between these things? Gravitational waves due to merging black holes definitely don't exist. Natural philosophy, physics, suggests simply that a disturbance travelling through the ether inside the 4-kilometre LIGO arms may be one way to produce a chirp signal in the LIGO system. This raises serious questions for the future of science and the usefulness of prize-giving as a motivator." Weiss and Thorne are two of three physicists known as the Troika, the founders of LIGO's giant twin detectors in Livingston, Louisiana and in Hanford, Washington. The third Troika member, Ronald Drever, died on the 7th of March this year. Before Drever's passing in March, the Troika won the $3 million Special Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics, the $500,000 Gruber Foundation Cosmology Prize, the $1.2 million Shaw Prize in Astronomy, and the $1 million Kavli Prize in Astrophysics. These and other Nobel Prize winners of the past have seriously warped our sense of reality. The public will have spent $1.1 billion providing super expensive gadgets to detect the grin of the cosmic Cheshire cat to mathematical gamers posing as physicists. Like the scientists wasting billions of euros on the Large Hadron Collider to find the imaginary Higgs boson, they had to find something to save their credibility. Government-funded, institutionalised big science is not working in the 21st century. The rewards, the lack of critical scrutiny, trust us, we're the experts, and suppression of dissenting voices have to be seriously investigated because we are about to waste a great deal more money. It's reported that the European Space Agency is planning a multi-billion-dollar probe to be launched in about 17 years that would look for gravitational waves from space. Weiss hopes astronomers will learn more about nuclear physics, states of matter, how heavy elements are made, and detect information from, and I quote, "the very moment when the universe came out of nothingness." "We expect surprises," he said. "There has to be surprises." The real surprise is how anyone can claim to be a physicist and say the universe came out of nothingness. That isn't physics. One of the dissenting voices, Dr. Harold Aspden, an outstanding British theoretical physicist, electrical engineer and inventor, wrote, "Until the scientific world recovers its good sense and takes another look at the mysteries of our cosmos, with the ether in mind and Einstein ignored, we really have no hope of inspiring future science students and gaining a better understanding of the phenomena which dominate, indeed constitute, our very existence. The galling thing is that the electric universe already has a real model of how gravity works, and it answers simply most of the real questions. We are now testing some of these models experimentally. Perversely, it is found that government funding hinders innovation because research is concentrated on the current preoccupations of those who direct research grants. We rely not on the government but on benefactors and public donations. It's the Renaissance model of doing science. Research has found that science seems to follow the innovation, not the other way around. The practical tinkerers find something, then science is employed to work out why that's what we've found works. The innovative Thunderbolts project is an outstanding example of this approach, with the distinguishing feature of having a coherent cosmology to direct the tinkerers. What hope is there for the future? History shows that paradigm shifts come from individuals, often from outside the affected discipline. Today, those in organisations that have access to science journals and the media, and who have the most to lose from a paradigm shift, suppress such claims or attempt to assimilate the ideas surreptitiously. Nobel Prizes have notoriously been awarded to those insiders who develop an outsider's idea. How can we find these innovators outside the academic system? Chris Reeve suggests in his online Controversies in Science, which I highly recommend, this is a world where we are dependent upon the experts for any announcement of our new paradigm. Yet the experts are the very people who stand to lose the most by such an announcement. He then asks the question, what would a paradigm change actually look like? And Chris answers, the correct answer is that, assuming you're not an actual academic, there's no real guarantee that you'd actually see our new paradigm emerging at all. If there was some exciting new scientific era just around the corner, we'd never know it. This, of course, applies to the electric universe paradigm. Chris then offers a solution through a science futures market where people can wager bets on well-crafted, specific, time-limited scientific predictions. Science futures markets have the potential to expose scientific dogma that's become embedded with science journalism. They can help us to identify impending paradigm changes as they reward those who are paying attention sufficiently to understand that the data is deviating from the carefully managed message we get from mainstream science. I wish such a market had been around decades ago, given the success of the many unique specific predictions of the electric universe when measured against the continual surprises for Big Bang cosmology. Instead of cramming heads with facts, we need documentation of science controversies, past and present, to be accessible to the public and teachers so that students can be trained in critical thinking. So-called evidence-based science can then be seen to be special pleading. One scientist's fact can be another's fiction. That's the basis of debunking. Learning this together with the ideas, context and personalities involved in earlier science debates allows one to see what persuaded crucial verdicts in the past and to realise how often those decisions had little to do with the science and more to do with beliefs, politics and influence. Understanding those debates is also perhaps the best way to inspire anyone to participate in science criticism and discovery. There is so much data and so little understanding of that data. We must stop funding and rewarding the religious belief expressed by Galileo that mathematics is the language of God, that the mathematical mind can deduce the true laws of nature, that the mathematical mind alone would lead to true knowledge of reality. Until we do, science remains a religious belief system.
Many of you heard about the big announcement that was going to be made, I don't know, a week or two ago or something like that. And of course, what that turned out to be was another one of these BS gravitational wave things where this time, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, we had two neutron stars that basically merged and generated a huge gravitational wave anomaly, which then traveled 140 million miles or something like that. And then we are able to detect it on our LIGO detectors, and bada bing, Einstein is proven right once again, even though the entire theory behind these nonsense LIGO facilities has been debunked time and time and time again, and as I'm about to show in a video here pretty soon, is in stark contrast to their own models that they use, as far as whether or not gravitational waves are instantaneous, or as Newton has postulated, and by the way, these instantaneous gravitational waves are the very same ones that they use to calculate orbital dynamics and things in the solar system and all of this, because if gravitational effect was not instantaneous, all of their calculations would not work whatsoever. And so that comes from one specific model of the universe that is called the Big Bang universe, okay, and then they have the other universe, which is the black hole universe, and these universes are basically in stark contrast to each other. They each have their own set of rules, and the tricky part about what science does is they kind of go back and forth between these two models interchangeably, even though they're in stark contrast with each other, to be able to explain a lot of the phenomenon that we're seeing. And LIGO is one of these things that fits into this category of on one hand they're using the physics from this model, but on the other hand they're using it from this model, etc., etc. I'm going to let Wal Thornhill describe this in a little bit much better than I do, because there was a video released by the Thunderbolts Project where Wal Thornhill talks about this, and I mean, he nails it so well. We're simply going to play the whole thing. I mean, you guys have got to hear this. He does it so well, it's amazing. But anyway, so this is the big news. On 17 August, physicists with 3 massive instruments, the twin 8-kilometer-long detectors of the Laser Interferometer Gravitational Wave Observatory, LIGO, in Hanford, Washington, and Livingston, Louisiana, and the Virgo detector, basically spotted waves unlike any seen before. All right, great. Again, this
So wait, is this in addition to the one that LIGO supposedly discovered that was 1.3 billion years ago, or this is the same thing?
No, it's a different one. This is a different one because
really?
Because
isn't that convenient?
yeah, and once again, and now it comes 101 years after the fact, right, of Einstein announcing this gravity. But because it was being debunked by so many physicists left and right, then they had to double down on the lie and essentially come out and say, oh, well, yeah, not only did they get these LIGO things, but we were able to observe this flash in the sky coming from this point 140 million light years away, and so that absolutely proves it, right? And they're claiming absolute victory in this and saying that Einstein was absolutely right. Well, I got news for you. Einstein's been wrong on virtually everything, and the physics, like I said, go back and forth between these two specific models. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this clip by Thunderbolts Project, and we are claiming fair use on this because this is absolutely for commentary, absolutely for educational purposes, and absolutely to debunk the nonsense that basically the black hole universe and the Big Bang universe are, and it shows the stark contrast between the two of them. So when I saw this, I was absolutely elated, and you guys got to hear this. So it's going to be, I don't know, I'm going to play about 9 minutes of it, and I'll make commentary in between. But you guys are going to be absolutely blown away by what is disclosed here, and the absolute stark contrast. The conflicts of this model that come up routinely in every presentation that astrophysicists ever talk about. So here we go. Oh, and by the way, the answer to all of this that solves all these anomalies is understanding that the universe is indeed electric, the sky is electric, all the phenomenon that we see is electric and plasma, and can be replicated in the lab any day of the week, and has been since back in Christian Birkeland's time coming forward. I mean, this model is the real deal, guys, and so with so many other scientists and physicists that are getting on board with this, the heliocentric model's in deep, deep trouble. And so they're doubling down, tripling down on the lie, and it's just amazing. So let's give this a listen.
The 2017 Nobel Prize for Physics has been awarded once again to mathematicians. This time it's for decisive contributions to the LIGO detector and the observation of gravitational waves. It seems the inmates are in charge of the asylum. Last month at the Royal Institution, Dr. Jim Baggott, an award-winning science author, lectured on the concept of mass, which is essential for understanding gravity. He declared that theoretical physicists have a dirty little secret. He explained, "The mission of a theoretical physicist trying to work out the nature of substance and elementary particles is to get the maths to work out correctly and consistent with what's gone on before. So we're discussing mathematics, not physics. And of course, what's gone on before is that mathematicians raised Einstein's general relativity to the status of scripture, while that theory ignores the substance of stars and planets that exhibit mass and gravity. So the theory has no physical basis whatsoever. It depends instead on a warped view of reality." Unsurprisingly, Jim Baggott failed to physically define mass or explain the mysterious equivalence of inertial mass and gravitational mass.
Right. So basically what he's saying here is, you look at the E equals MC hammer equation. E equals MC squared equation. I had to use that, John. I love that from last week. But they're saying that, okay, we have energy equals mass times the speed of light squared, right? E equals mc squared. Well, they have never been able to adequately define what mass actually is. And this is no secret, guys. That is what is truly astounding about this. This big theory, this big formula that Einstein has come up with is simply based on pure and absolute mathematical conjecture. And in fact, you got to love this little chart right here, that shows the difference between science and math. And science and math are not the same thing. Physics and math are not the same thing. Math is a tool used to describe things in physics, but absolutely what they're doing today is they're wandering off, like Einstein, or like Tesla said, they're wandering off through equation after equation. Where now we're at the point where everything is a mathematical construct and it has absolutely no basis in observable reality. Okay, so here's the comparison. Science says to make observations. Math says to make assumptions. Absolutely true. Collect data and look for patterns in science. Collect data and look for patterns in math. Okay, we got a match there. Science says to state a hypothesis. Math says state the conjectures. Science says construct a theory. Math says prove the theorems. Okay, and then here's the big difference. Science says gain a better understanding of our universe, meaning the real universe, meaning the one that we actually live in, right? And math says gain a better understanding of a universe, and that a universe is the mathematically constructed universe. Okay, not anything in reality, but something that was simply dreamed up by mathematicians. And of course, they can always make their numbers fit. And like Wall just said, the job of the mathematicians is to make it fit with previous observations and to make it work out with their overall theorem. So let's continue.
The dirty little secret is that mathematics is the foreign language of physics. Few claim to understand the language, and the Math to English dictionary is woefully incomplete because the editors, the natural philosophers, were sacked a century ago. So key words like mass and energy are physically undefined, and infinities are reified, which allows a photon to exist having no mass but carrying energy. The shocking truth is that...
Okay, so I want to accentuate what he just said. Infinities are reified, meaning that in the mathematical world, the only way that they can make these mathematical models work is to introduce the idea of infinities, right? In infinite gravity, infinite mass, infinite this. Well, anybody with any common sense at all knows that just by making the statement of infinite gravity means that if that is true from any one point in space and it's infinite, that everything is sucked instantly into a black hole and nothing else could possibly exist. We couldn't exist. And again, this is a mathematical construct. Is it real? Obviously not. I mean, it's nonsense. So that's I just wanted to accentuate that. Infinities are commonplace in mathematics, but not in the real world. And in fact, in the real world, we have no example of infinity. Period. End of story. Let's continue.
Well, and another good point that he made is that all of relativity is based, or well, maybe not relativity, but the idea that photons or protons, whatever he said, can have energy but have no mass, and that is a bit of a conundrum, isn't it?
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah, just a little bit.
Yep. So.
The only infinite thing is the budget of NASA. That is infinite.
Right. Okay, let's continue.
E equals mc squared is not physically understood. It seems physics is a foreign discipline for mathematicians also. Phys.org asks, what is space-time? And answers, space-time is the mind-bending, four-dimensional way astronomers see the universe. It melds the one-way march of time with the more familiar three dimensions of space. But how can astronomers see anything in four dimensions? And point me in the direction that time is marching. Lumping together the concept of locations in three dimensions, that is space, with the numbers on clocks, that is time, cannot constitute a physical fabric. Space-time is a meaningless concatenation of words. It isn't physics. As a result, translations of theoretical mathematics into plain English have become meaningless, New Age nonsense.
Absolutely. Because we get these times. I mean, first of all, everybody knows that a clock is not representative of time. Time is a man-made concept, okay? And space, we have Einstein's definition of space as basically something that is malleable and can be bent with mass, which is again another undefined mathematical construct. So again, we're just building fantasy after fantasy after fantasy, with these mathematical equations, and it has no basis in reality whatsoever. And this goes back to, the whole thing about LIGO, about these gravitational waves. The way that LIGO supposedly works is when these gravitational waves actually cut across these 8-kilometer long tubes, it physically alters the size, the length of these chambers, right? We have no example of that. Nowhere. No experiment, no empirical evidence, nothing. So where are they even coming up with the idea that this is even a viable way to test for gravitational waves? And the other thing that's really amazing about this is because they're wanting to sense just very, very small changes in physical structure. Isn't it interesting that the LIGO detector that is built in Louisiana is built right on the intersection of basically 3 fault lines? No room for any misreadings there, right? Sheesh. Okay.
I liked what was it? Physics.org definition of space-time. It was pretty much just a bunch of words.
Yeah, nonsense, just like Walt said. So let's continue on.
Mathematics isn't physics. When it comes to experiment, how can our prize winners claim an infinitesimal signal is a hypothetical gravitational effect allegedly caused by objects, black holes, that have never been observed? How can our prize winners be so specific about the masses of 2 merging black holes? A black hole has never been observed. If a theorist is unable to discover real objects, which cause the observed effects, it is unscientific. Indeed, it is fraudulent to invent unreal objects and present them as a factual discovery of the cause of those effects. Gravitational waves and black holes are merely mathematical speculations with fatal problems, which I'll address in a moment. And how can you have decisive contributions from a detector when the effect is a displacement of less than the width of a proton over 4 kilometers?
Right, and that's another thing you got to remember. Over 4 kilometers, and we're talking about these lasers are picking up something that would be less than the width of a proton, right, over that distance. Can you even imagine that type of scale? I mean, anything would cause, even a vibration in the earth.
A gnat farted.
Yeah, I was going to actually say that. If a fly farted, it would absolutely set that thing off. It is so preposterous, it's unbelievable. But and that's his point here, so let's move on.
The experiment is a textbook example of pathological science.
Amen.
Matching signal patterns from a huge database of 250,000 theoretical templates of alleged binary black hole collisions, hoping one might coincide with the infinitesimal recorded signals. Critical to the detection algorithm is that the alleged gravitational waves are assumed to travel at the speed of light. So there is a time delay expected between similar signal patterns from separate LIGO detectors. But Newton's theory, which is used successfully to navigate the solar system, has gravity operating instantly. Time doesn't appear in his law of gravity. Newton's gravity acts like a rigid rod between celestial bodies, where the tug at one end is felt immediately at the other end.
Does that sound familiar, Jern? Didn't you make a video on that?
Absolutely.
and that would be exactly
the big thing that math is reality. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't get.
Yeah, you got to remember that.
No, you said it wrong. It's math is reality. No.
Math is reality. Sorry.
So again, now what he's going to describe here is the stark contrast of the two gravitational theories between Newton and Einstein. And isn't it amazing how physics will just kind of go back and forth and back and forth? And the other thing I forgot to point out a minute ago is, isn't it amazing that the Nobel Prize for Physics went to mathematicians? Hello, the mathematicians are not physicists, and basically math has very little to do with the observation and mechanics of a physical universe. So that in and of itself is preposterous. But let's move on.
This is actually essential for the clockwork regularity of the planetary system, but it's never considered because the effect exceeds Einstein's speed limit of light waves. What light has to do with the force of gravity is not explained. Meanwhile, the phys.org report states, gravitational waves stretch space in one direction and compress it in a transverse direction. How Einstein's gravity, which does away with force, manages to allegedly stretch and compress a four-dimensional geometric concept of empty space is unexplained. The important thing to note is that the signals did not arrive at the same time in each LIGO detector, so the LIGO signals were not caused by gravity. More damning, though, is that the physical implications of black hole theory seem not to be understood by any academic. Steve Crothers addressed this issue in his Electric Universe 2017 presentation. Amongst other things, he points out that the black hole universe is infinite and not expanding, while the Big Bang universe is finite and expanding. The black hole universe is eternal, while the Big Bang universe is 13.8 billion years old.
So, and listen up to this close, guys, because look at this chart, versus, the black hole universe versus the Big Bang universe, and, the main differences in the two. And as you can see, they are in absolute stark contrast to each other. And, again, there's a whole lot of assumptions with infinities and all this stuff. And Steve's going to go over this and talk, or actually, Steve did cover this, and I've got this EU talk. It's fantastic, but let's continue on.
The black hole universe is asymptotically flat, while the Big Bang universe is not asymptotically anything. A black hole universe contains only one mass, while the Big Bang universe contains many masses. So we, as observers, cannot exist in a black hole universe. And two black holes orbiting each other in the Big Bang universe is impossible. Yet we are led to believe that 4 binary pairs of black holes have been positively identified and accurately weighed through vanishingly tiny chirp signals. To drive home the sheer nonsense of black hole theory, Steve itemizes its properties. A black hole has finite mass concentrated at its singularity. The singularity has zero volume and infinite density. The black hole has no gravitational force, only space-time curvature. There is infinite curvature at the singularity, which means infinite gravity. Steve says, let's think about that. A finite mass is located in zero volume. It has infinite density. It has infinite gravity. Do you think any such thing exists? It's simply assumed by the originators of black hole gravitational collapse theory that matter is uncharged and infinitely compressible. It is also simply assumed that the gravitational equations and the universal constant of gravitation, g, are universal and can be applied inside the Earth and stars without change. There is no mention of the matter in those bodies, which is the origin of their mass and gravity. Meanwhile, their partners in mathematical fraud, particle theorists, have decided that normal matter has no intrinsic mass, which further obscures the origin of gravity and our understanding of the universe. It's a self-serving myth that Einstein's mathematics predicts black holes. The originators of black hole theory in 1965, including Thorne, chose not to mention that Einstein's October 1939 paper, which they refer to, concludes with, "The Schwarzschild singularity," the term black hole had not been introduced then, "does not appear for the reason that matter cannot be concentrated arbitrarily, and this is due to the fact that otherwise the constituting particles would reach the velocity of light." Einstein showed mathematically that black holes cannot form gravitationally for the same reason that stars and planets cannot, because the infalling matter begins to circle the centre of mass until the centrifugal force balances the gravitational force. The observational evidence now shows that stars and planets are formed by the powerful electromagnetic force produced in electromagnetic pinches along cosmic lightning filaments in molecular clouds. Gravitational collapse theory is now discredited by direct observation.
All right. So that is absolutely astounding what he just said. And again, we have these different models of the universe, and it's simply, they are simply incompatible with each other. And yet, whenever they want to roll out some theory, to try and reinforce Einstein's theories, they are rolling out something that is in stark contrast to his own mathematics, his own theorems that he has put out. And it's absolutely astounding that anybody, again, who follows this doesn't get this. It is so simple. Einstein debunks himself time after time after time again, and NASA debunks Einstein by their use of Newtonian physics, out in the solar system, right? So again, here we have two different models, and they are used, at the convenience of whoever's putting together the mathematical theorem to describe their model. Is any of it backed by any observational evidence whatsoever? Absolutely not. Mathematics, in terms of describing the universe, is a fraud, plain and simple. And I don't know what other conclusion anybody can draw from this. And this is exactly why they're rolling out, then stepping up the propaganda behind NASA and their discoveries and more CGI. They're literally flooding the minds of people, and they're absolutely making up blatant lies when they can't even define what mass is. There is no actual technical definition for what mass is, and yet we have this gravitational model of Einstein's, which is basically described by bending space fabric itself, space-time itself, versus the Newtonian model, which comes to us by masses attracting in on themselves and creating gravity that way. It's just beyond belief.
You know what the funniest thing about the whole thing is that people who follow science, back science, would actually say that the guy that was just talking, Steve, that's just pseudoscience. They don't realize that their stuff that they're backing is completely, and I mean, it is the definition of pseudoscience. Yet they think that that's good science. They think because the majority of people or the majority of scientists all agree on something that it must be true, even though it's a place they've never been, they'll never go, they've never seen, they've never measured, they've never tested, but it must be true.
Yes.
So are the gravitational universe and Big Bang Theory universe, are those rival theories, or are they just physicists sort of interchange them and use them at their convenience?
They interchange them and use them at their convenience. And of course, as you said, any universe that has black holes in it is wholly incompatible with a universe that's created from a Big Bang. And again, the thing that really makes this crazy, the Big Bang universe is allowing for infinite variables, right? And we don't have infinite anything, like I said. Nero made that point quite well. It's just ridiculous. that people allow their minds to go off into absolute Alice in Wonderland territory, and it has no basis whatsoever in physics. It's a mathematical construct. So obviously it comes down to, well then, what is it that these physicists are talking about? What is it that is actually happening when Neil deGrasse Tyson walks out on the stage and drops his microphone on the ground? What is that? Okay. Well, again, as the flat Earth position is ultimately density and buoyancy, but as I have claimed many times, there is still something that is setting a bias that we have to consider of what is actually determining up from down, and again, that thing is actually electrostatic force that's doing this. It's something that is found naturally in the Earth, and we have covered this before on Globebusters, but I think maybe I will expand on this even a little bit more next week, because yeah, sure, we've proven, I think, pretty well what gravity is not, and also the complete and blatant, contradictions in gravitational models between Einstein's and Newton's gravitational models. So, but it still doesn't answer the question, well, what exactly are we observing here, and how does it work? And again, this is easily explained in the electric universe model, and with dipole alignment theory, and this is something I'll go into, talking about things that we can actually observe, we actually can measure, the electrostatic field of the Earth, how it increases as you go up higher and higher and higher, and what electricity has to do with all of this. So this will be coming up in a future episode of Globebusters.